fast forward and it's fall semester at IU. I was never meant to be a rebel-rouser, but I was determined to take my one wild spring break trip over the Christmas and New Year's holiday of 1969. However, initially those plans had to be shelved because the Big Eight accounting firm of Haskins and Sells, presently they're known as Deloitte, somehow became interested in me. In October of 1969, they gave me $500 and their award for excellent in accounting for an accounting major at Indiana University. In early December, the H&S office in Los Angeles sent an invitation letter to interview at their Los Angeles office over the Christmas holidays. Their plan was to interview on Monday the 29th. They advanced me $400 for airfare and miscellaneous expenses. According to Google, $1 in 1970 is the equivalent to $8 today. So my $400 from H&S was the equivalent of receiving $3,200 today. Now I ask you, could a young college male have some real fun with $3,200? Unfortunately or fortunately, again depending upon perspective, my adventurous mind started to dominate my cautious side. You may ask, what the hell was I up to? Well, you see, around the same time that H&S had invited me to Los Angeles, Pug Smith, my friend from Austin, had called me from Houston inviting me to come down to celebrate Christmas and New Year's Eve with him and his family and his cute younger sister, which of course had no bearing on my decision-making, and you know I'm lying like a rug. I would be free of academics by the 17th, so instead of booking my flight from Indianapolis to Los Angeles, I figured out that, step number 1, I could drive home the 17th to Olney, Illinois, to briefly see my parents and sister. I did not want my family to know about the LA interview, solely because I wanted to do this one thing on my own, and to be free of everybody else's opinions of what to do with my life. I had no idea that by the time I would graduate from IU, I would be engaged to be married in August, that marriage would start my in California near Sacramento, in U.S. Air Force flight navigation training. Life can really come at you very quickly. If there is an underlying theme to this piece, that's it. I love the movie, The Graduate. It epitomizes this theme. Life can indeed come on fast after or just before a young adult is about to or just graduate from college. Dustin Hoffman's character was me in a nutshell. He's somewhat shy, he's shorter than the average male, he gets involved with an older woman, but becomes attracted to her daughter. No, I did not have an affair with my student Carolyn, but, to be honest, it could have been headed in that direction. She never became Mrs. Robinson, but initially I sensed some displeasure with her second husband, Tammy's stepdad. Maybe my imagination is getting the best of me. Step number 2, drive the 880 miles to Houston on Saturday the 20th. Enjoy my stay with the Smith family through Christmas Day. I had enough time and H&S's money to buy them all gifts once I got to Houston. I thought my plan was coming together just peachy. Step number 3, use Pug's father's travel agent to get everything arranged. Indianapolis to LA was no longer on my radar. The agent would book the round-trip flight from Houston to LA for Friday the 26th. As it turned out, the cost was only about 60% of the round-trip fare from Indianapolis to LA. In my mind, I was making money with this line of thought. Step number 4, I would fulfill my commitments in Los Angeles and return to Houston on Monday evening on the 29th of December. I could then celebrate the New Year's with the Smiths and Nancy, my friend's cute little sister. I wasn't due back in classes at IU until January 5th, 1970. This plan was going to net me around $150 of the $400, the equivalent of $1,200 in today's dollars. In double-checking my dates, guess what I just learned from the internet? The calendar for 2025 for days of the week and dates are identical. The 1969 calendar. First, I started clicking back on the Windows 11 computer calendar in the lower left corner of my computer screen, and damn near got carpal tunnel syndrome in my wrist from just using my index finger to click all the way back to December of 1969. As soon as I returned to my MS Word document, I lost the display. I hope you find that as amusing as I do. So here's the skivvy. Christmas Day was to fall on a Thursday, and I was to be in Los Angeles Friday evening. The firm knew I was a varsity athlete playing tennis at IU, and that was one of the reasons that they were interested in me. Their recruitment strategy was to go after scholar athletes, in particular those athletes in the social sports like tennis and golf. Law firms and CPAs did not advertise in 1970 like they do today. Clients were gained on the country club tennis courts and golf courses, especially in California. Tell me that these guys were not forward-thinking. In today's world, Deloitte has risen to the top spot in the CPA and management advisory services arena by this recruitment strategy. They have not been recruiting a bunch of dummies. So I fit their profile of a varsity athlete who basically makes very good grades, particularly in his or her accounting courses, which I did. The firm informed me they had set up a competitive doubles match at one of their partners' country club for the following Sunday, the 28th. They figured I would need an unplanned day to get my bearings. I hate to admit it, but I didn't want my parents, or especially my big sister, to know what I was up to. So Pug's dad used his travel agent make the reservation for me. The itinerary was to fly out of Houston to arrive in Los Angeles Friday evening and take the red eye out of Los Angeles back to Houston on Monday night after my interview that afternoon. Their offices were housed on several floors of the building downtown at 1 Wilshire Boulevard. What did they say about the best laid plans? They sound good until things go to hell. That should tell you my little perfect plan did just that. So I leave Olney on the Saturday before I'm supposed to be in Los Angeles playing tennis at some partner's exclusive country club. I get to Pug's home in Houston driving 880 miles in around 17 hours. Now I want you, the listener, to make note of that information specifically. It took me 17 hours to drive 880 miles. This will be used for a comparison later in this story of my wildest adventure. So the day arrives that my parents see me off to Houston thinking I'm just going down to spend the holidays with the Smith family. Originally, I was going to drive to Indianapolis to book my initial flight to LA and pay cash at the desk in the Indianapolis airport. Pug's father's travel agent eliminated that chore, thank goodness. I would reimburse Mr. Smith once I got to Houston. This way, my family, especially my sister, would not be involved in my plans for my holiday vacation. They would have no idea I was going to Los Angeles to interview with Haskins and Sells. So I'm in a pretty good mood and cruising down Interstate 30 south of Little Rock, listening to Stefan Wolf's Born to be Wild. The speed limit was 75 miles an hour, and I get pulled over by an Arkansas state trooper. He asks for license and registration, no problem. He asks why I was in such a hurry. I replied that the devil made me do it. No, not really. Just wanted to know if you are paying attention. I told the truth. Said that I was so involved listening to Stefan Wolf's Born to be Wild that I didn't realize I was going over 90 miles an hour until he pulled me over. I could not believe it when he said, and I quote, "Young man, I love Stefan Wolf's Born to be Wild. And that fact is going to get you out of this ticket, but please slow your ass down." The rest of my journey to Houston was uneventful, and I was very thankful for that. I was able to rest and acclimate to my new surroundings on Sunday, but Pug and his sister Nancy had me going to a big party with them on Monday evening. It was a blast, and we did not get back home until a little past 3 in the morning. The very next day was when my carefully laid plans started on a trip to hell. Pug informed me that his parents were off to Acapulco to stay with a dear friend named Jim Baugh, whom I would later meet. The new plan was that we should drive down to join leaving in the morning, Wednesday, Christmas Eve. I said that would be impossible because I had to fly out of Houston to Los Angeles on Friday. Now, Pug, who is a very likable guy, but once he made up his mind, he rarely is going to change it. In his mind, there are always options and people just need to learn to adapt. One should not let a few pesky details get in way of having a good time. He convinced me that I could fly from Acapulco to LA on Saturday and fly back to Acapulco on Monday after my interview. Then we could drive back to Houston, and I could still be back in Bloomington by the 5th of January. He said just call the firm, tell them simply cannot get to LA by Friday evening of the 26th. You will be in Saturday afternoon the 27th. He even pumped up my ego as a tennis player, claiming I would have no problem handling the three jokers, his words not mine, at a country club. With the two of us driving, Pug estimated that we could drive the 1,160 miles from Houston to Acapulco easily in 24 hours. That would put us in Acapulco Thursday morning, January 1st, 1970. We would take a healthy nap that morning and early afternoon and be ready to tear up Acapulco that evening. By this time, I figured I'd already blown the interview with Haskins and Sells, and if I had to give them the money back, I would manage. I was determined to have a real spring break that had been withheld from me the previous 3 years of my college days. The LA office personnel director had already told me that if the interview went well, they would be offering me a job in LA for the entire summer before my commitment to the United States Air Force would start in mid-September. If that fell through because of this misadventure, I knew I could just play tournaments for the summer and start U.S. Air Force Navigation School in California in September. This totally made sense to me. My only loss was Nancy Smith was not going with us and was staying in Houston. I had become quite attracted to her, for we had had a great time at the party that we had managed to make it to on Monday evening. When you're 21, the old hormones are grinding on your psyche every minute of the day. Just telling it like it is or was in 1969. So the decision was made for better or worse, with Pug and I planning to leave Wednesday morning for Acapulco in my 1968 Mercury Cougar. It had only a few easy miles on it, no more than 10,000. I started thinking and asked Pug if I needed a passport. He nodded no, but then he asked me if I had the title to my car. Unbelievably, I had kept it with me on my father's advice. He had paid cash for the car when he bought it for me and gave me the title immediately. I think he wanted to know that he had great trust in his son, and up to this point in my life, I had never given him anything to doubt that perception. However, my gut told me I might be doing something that would disappoint him. But I quickly erased that thought to concentrate on getting my ass in one piece to Acapulco. I really wanted to enjoy the adventure about to unfold for someone who had taken very little risk before this opportunity came along. With title complications solved, two crazy guys in a Mercury Cougar blasted off for Acapulco. We were anxiously looking forward to being a couple of rebel rousers south of the border. Way south of the border. Leg number 1, Houston to Laredo, 315 miles in just over 5 hours. We allotted 6. Leg was uneventful. We got there before 1 p.m. Houston time, had no problems at the border. Proved the title was in my name, and I was who I was with my Illinois driver's license. Only took 30 minutes at most to receive our paperwork that would get us through Mexico. That would include all the way to Acapulco, according to the officials at the border. This turned out to be absolutely true. No complications. Leg number 2, Laredo to Monterrey, Mexico, 140 miles with 3.5 hours allotted to this leg, because we included the 30 minutes at the border on this leg. Gas, bathroom break, and lunch in Monterrey consumed another hour. Left Houston at 7 a.m., and by the time we left Monterrey for Mexico City, it was getting close to 5 p.m. Houston time. The road from Laredo to Monterrey is about as straight a stretch of highway that I have ever been on my life. Leg 3, Monterrey to Mexico City, just short of 700 miles with the driving time of 11 hours and 30 minutes. This is where having two drivers was crucial. The time of the year that we were driving is some of the shortest days in the Northern Hemisphere. It wasn't long before we were into the night on the road to a city with more population than any in the United States. Mexican capital was almost 9 million people in 1970. It was looking for about a 4 a.m. arrival in Mexico City. That's on Houston time, but I think it's on Central Time also. I'm detailing our trip to Acapulco for it will be relevant for comparison's sake. Later in this story, as you will see. We drove pretty fast on this leg, and we were headed toward Acapulco on the far side of Mexico City on schedule. Leg the 4, Mexico City to Acapulco, was around 240 miles and took us almost exactly 4 hours, arriving at the hacienda at 8:00 a.m. Houston and Acapulco time. I was surprised they were on Central Time, same as Houston. The beautiful home faced the highly commercialized side of the Acapulco Bay with its big resort hotels dominating the skyline. This home belonged to a Dallas millionaire whose name was Troy Post. Troy Victor Post was connected to the Smith family through Jim Baugh, who worked for Mr. Post in public relations. Mr. Post was a very successful entrepreneur in all facets of insurance business. He was 64 in 1970 when I was privileged to stay in his home on the bay in Acapulco. Mr. Post died in 1998 at the age of 92. I never had the privilege of meeting the man, but I certainly enjoyed my stay in his lovely hacienda in Mexico. Pug and I were ready for the sack and followed our plan precisely. We got to sleep about 10 a.m. It really wasn't a bad trip because Pug and I got along very well and talked almost consistently, except when one of us wanted to nap. For about 2 hours between Laredo and Monterey, we had gotten WLS in Chicago on the AM radio. I learned later that if a cloud layer is just right elevation, the AM radio signal can reflect off that layer and give good strong reception to a receiver much farther away than under normal circumstances. Here's a bit of trivia for you. WLS originally stood for World's Largest Store and was owned by Sears and Roebuck at one time. Aren't I just a fountain of information? Now it's time to get to the rebel-rousing part of this story. The juicy part, as many people would say. The hacienda had its own swimming pool, cook, and maid service. This was my first time experiencing how the better half or the better 10% live in this world. It's pretty damn good, I'll tell you. We had missed New Year's Eve by while driving the night, but Acapulco on the Friday after New Year's was just getting started in celebrating the new year. There were many opportunities for us to find trouble if we weren't careful. That evening we headed for the beach in front of the big hotels. All the tourist youth were in the beach area. It wasn't long before Pug and I had cornered our own foursome of hot German girls who were there to party hardy. They had already been there for almost a week and told us they were getting bored because there were no cool guys to have fun with. We quickly informed them that their prayers had been answered, and we were there to accommodate their most sinful desires. Of course, this was done in a very jovial and tactful manner. Good old Jim, a weathered man of around 50 and an alcoholic, with the help the travel agent in Houston, had secured my reservation for my flight up to Los Angeles. No one was aware or thinking about the complications that would arise when I got to the airport Saturday morning to take my flight. Jim was with us when we arrived at the ticket counter at the airport early Saturday morning. Like I said earlier, I had found out that I would gain 2 hours flying to Los Angeles with them on Pacific time. Next was the news that sank my whole plan. We were informed that my paperwork indicated that I had driven a vehicle into Mexico and had no proof that it was currently impounded, a condition required for me to leave the country. My only option was to drive back to the U.S. Unless I had that paperwork, it was illegal for me to fly out of Mexico. If my vehicle was going to remain in Mexico, I was simply screwed. The reason for this requirement was to prevent opportunists from bringing in a car bought for at normal U.S. pricing, then driving it into Mexico and selling it on the black market for more than double the original purchase price in the U.S. This clearly made sense to me, for that first night in downtown Acapulco, a well-dressed man offered me $8,000 for my Cougar. There was no way I was going to get to fly out of Mexico on a plane. It was approaching 8 a.m. Central Standard Time. Now it got real complicated when Jim attempted to bribe the ticking agent, and he turned out to be one of the few honest officials in Mexico, and damn near had us arrested before we fled the airport to avoid that outcome. On the way back, we examined what my options were, basically not good and terrible. I told you this story was going to more interesting. By the time we got back to our hacienda, we had started to come up with a workable plan. Jim was going to make a reservation for me out of Houston, leaving somewhere close to noon to get me into LA on Sunday, so I could still make my interview on Monday. I nearly threw in the towel, but something made me give it a shot. All I knew was I was going to have to drive a hell of a lot faster and minimize stops when stopping for gas and bathroom breaks. Nancy was going to be ready to take me to the airport when I got to Houston on Sunday morning. Time was slipping away, and I had to get my ass on the road and headed to Houston within the hour. This is the adventure that I was talking about. Just stay with me a little while longer, and as they often say, for the dramatic conclusion. We computed I had to get to arrive at Pug's home sometime between 9 and 10 a.m. to make the 11 a.m. flight out of Houston. By the time I got organized and got going, it was almost 4 p.m. Central Standard Time. It was almost a lost cause, but I hit the road determined that I could make it. The road from Acapulco to Mexico City is very curvy with few guardrails to prevent a car from going off into very deep canyons. In other words, it's dangerous as hell. Jim gave me a quick and dirty briefing on what to do if I got into or saw an accident, which was basically don't have or get involved in any with one. The adrenaline was starting to flow, and so I was wired even though Pug and I had spent another delightful evening with the German girls. We didn't stay up all night, but we still didn't get back to the hacienda till about 2 a.m. Saturday morning. So I'm running on about 4 hours of sleep, but fortunately it was a very solid 4 hours. I was going to need it because about 2 hours in, halfway to Mexico City, I'm in the slowest part of the route of about 240 miles. I'm stuck behind traffic. There were 2 or 3 cars ahead of me, and they were behind an old Mexican bus that couldn't have been going more in about 35 miles an hour. I look at my rearview mirror, and here comes a brand new red Corvette with a gentleman driver who reminded me of Fernando Lamas. He started pulling up alongside me to get a better look ahead, and I can tell he was smoking a cigarette through a holder that made the whole situation very comical to me. Well, Fernando, or whatever the hell his name was not a patient man. All of a sudden, he swings his Corvette out into the oncoming lane to try to get around all of us. This included me, the 3 cars in front of me, and the old bus. He did this on one of the curves that had big mirrors so you could see around if there was traffic coming. I thought I saw traffic coming, but apparently he did not, for this gentleman was experiencing his last minute on this earth. He lost control, went off the road. His car blew up halfway down the side of the mountain into the canyon below. There was nothing anyone could do for that foolish dude. Jim had told me do not stop for someone else's accident. Many of the Mexican drivers did, and they were giving the crossing heart gesture because they knew that guy was toast. My adrenaline was pegged to the max. My instinct was to get as far away from there as possible and as quickly as possible. Before I knew it was nighttime, and I was going around Mexico City. I knew I was going to have to put the pedal to the metal as I headed north to the border at Laredo. Jim had told me the Mexican traffic police did not spend time on the highways between Mexico City and the United States, trying to stop speeders. They had too many other problems that demanded the resources of their police force. So he basically told me that I could crank her up, especially at night, until I got to the border. He even gave me a shortcut that could save me 20 to 30 minutes getting from Laredo back to Houston. I had had everything checked out on my Cougar before I left on this trip with the original dealer who sold the car to my father. The car was in tip-top shape and that Cougar was ready to run. The road from Mexico City to Monterey is not straight as an arrow, but it's really not that curvy. It just changes directions more than the straight shot between Laredo and Monterey. I knew where I had to gas up because there were stretches of over 200 miles. Well, you weren't going to get gas in the middle of the night. All those details had taken up some of the time to plan for, and this resulted in delaying my departure. But it was time well spent. The planning would pay off immensely. So how fast was I going? I set on 105 for over 2 hours until I came over a slight knoll in the highway, where I could not see over the horizon. I damn near bit the farm. There were friggin' cows sleeping on the highway. I damn near made hamburger out of 3 of them. It actually was a blessing because I'd started to get weary-eyed. That event triggered more adrenaline and I was wired again. It was time to pray, so I did. I first asked God, what the hell else are you going to throw at me? There was no answer. I pressed on and started again running around 105 again. Monterey back to Laredo was on the straightest part of the route. Fortunately, I only had to spend minutes getting across the border. I immediately instigated Jim's shortcut route. I needed the 20 to 30 minutes that it could save me. I had to get to Nancy Smith at her house by 9 a.m. to have a shot at catching my flight to Los Angeles. I had about 4 hours and 45 minutes to go, according to my calculations, so I needed that shortcut. It was very easy to find the remote asphalt road that had very little fencing and very shallow drainage to each side of the road. I was around 2 hours and change from my destination when I fell asleep. When I woke up, I was approximately 150 yards off the highway, about to hit what is called a Texas Plains prickly pear cactus. It was big as a tree. My Cougar's suspension would never be the same, for it had suffered its first real wear and tear on that fateful night, approximately 2 hours from Houston on a dark desert highway. Just had to throw in a little Hotel California lyric for you Eagles fans, clearly not the Philadelphia ones. 2 more unique things happened shortly after my off-road excursion. I was getting sleepy again. The adrenaline was starting to wear off. Within minutes of getting back on the road, I encountered a mountain lion chewing on a very unlucky calf. 20 minutes later, I came upon a real cowboy hitchhiking with his saddle on his shoulders, with saddlebags attached to the saddle. So I picked him up because I needed somebody to keep me awake. The gentleman managed to get his saddle and saddlebags into the back seat since my trunk was full. As he gets in, he closes the door and removes the handkerchief that had been covering his mouth and nose. The wind had been blowing the desert dust to where that covering was absolutely necessary. I knew that, so I wasn't alarmed that he looked like a bank robber out of the Old West when I picked him up. I was astonished when I saw his face, for he was a dead ringer. Dead ringer for Paul Newman. I immediately made that observation to him, and he simply said, "Oh shucks, I hear that all the time." I did not laugh, I simply smiled and nodded, and we were off. I dropped him off where he needed be to go a different direction. I needed to catch Nancy for my ride to the airport pronto. As I pulled in, Nancy was waiting with her car running. She was acutely aware of the tight schedule. She helped me transfer the stuff I was going to take to LA with me, and we were off to the airport. It was going to be real close. Fortunately, she knew the best way to get to the ideal parking garage, parked quickly, and directed me through the airport to catch my flight. Tickets in hand with my racket bag serving as my carry-on, I raced for the gate, finding the area practically empty. Airline personnel were about to close the cabin door when the gate agent yelled out for them to stop and let me on. This scenario could not possibly happen in today's environment of security at the airports. Simply no way, Jose. But in 1969, this could still be pulled off. And I know because I've done this twice. I've gotten on airplanes with about 10 seconds to spare both times. This time and once in Charleston, South Carolina, when I had to return a car, and that made me cut it this close also. That in itself was a strange trip, for I had taken Eastern Airlines out of Miami to Charleston. I was the only passenger on an airplane that could hold at least 100 people. On this latest trip, I also had pulled it off and made my flight to Los Angeles. I was one worn out camper. I ended up with a seat in the very back of the airplane. I think it was the last row. I vaguely remember the plane taking off in Houston. The next thing I remember, I was being very aggressively shook by one of the flight attendants. She had been starting to become very concerned when I did not wake easily. I know she was relieved when I finally woke up. I had made it. I was in LA, safe and sound, on a nice Sunday afternoon in the City of Angels. I definitely had some of those angels watching over me for my 17-hour trip of approximately 1,200 miles. Remember, it took me 17 hours to drive the 880 miles from Olney, Illinois to Houston. There's the comparison I wanted you to be able to make. I had made it 7 hours faster than it took Pug and I to drive to Acapulco. That average is slightly over 70 miles an hour. Remember, an hour of my trip was at 35 miles an hour, behind the bus, halfway to Mexico City from Acapulco. I had called and explained to Mr. Burns, as I best can remember. He was a wonderful man who was the personnel director for the LA office of Haskins and Sells. He was unbelievable in that he had rearranged all the plans, made sure I had hotel accommodations close to the office in downtown LA, and had given me instructions of the best way to get to the hotel from the airport. Obviously, this man was very good at his job. He had been asked to take care of me, and he certainly did. So now we enter the last little chapter of the Undertaker Navigator's big adventure, before he ever became the Undertaker Navigator. I was clearly expecting a little bit of a dressing down from my scheduled contacts at the LA office. Nothing could have been further from the truth. There were 3 or 4 partners waiting for this crazy recruit from IU that had ran off to Mexico on their dime. They were not there to give me a lecture. They were there because they wanted my first-hand account of what I had just gone through to get there. Every one of them, I believe, was thirsty for adventure as much as I was when I left Bloomington the last day of my classes to leave on crazy Christmas holiday. I had barely got started, and the conference room had filled up with 15 to 20 people who wanted to hear every detail of my crazy experience in Mexico. I did not disappoint them. I came totally clean, how I had used their $400 advance to work in a little adventure, because I felt that I needed before launching into the business world, and my military commitment. I told them the whole unfiltered, unvarnished mess of a story as honestly as I could on that Monday morning, December the 29th, 1969. That became my interview. We never discussed accounting or my future employment with the firm. I was told by Mr. Burns that they would be getting back to me with an offer for employment in Los Angeles as soon as I went to New York for a week of orientation immediately after my graduation. This all came to pass, and I arrived in Los Angeles in early June of 1970, engaged to be married in late August, and scheduled to begin U.S. Air Force navigation training at Mather Air Force Base, California, in September. In other videos, I've related my experiences auditing casinos in Las Vegas, working out of that Los Angeles office when I was living in Marina del Rey. As I've stated, that firm today has evolved into a juggernaut called Deloitte. The Deloitte name evolved from the firm's international name that I knew in the early 70s. It was Deloitte, Haskins and Sells. They'll always be the class act in my book. They are at the top among the big partnerships that audit and provide financial and management services to most of the major corporations of the world. Legally, the big accounting firms cannot incorporate and limit their liability. They must remain partnerships. Arthur Andersen was near the top in 1970, but ultimately forgot their independence when they were involved with Enron. That scandal not only took down the corporate entity, it took down Arthur Andersen, since they were the auditors of record and had certified Enron's financials, resulting in a massive cover-up. Here's one last tidbit of interesting information. Up until 2015, what is the most money that had ever been paid for an office building in Los Angeles, and how much was paid? Hines Real Estate Investment Trust sold the number 1 Wilshire Boulevard building to GI Partners in July 2013 for a total of $437.5 million in U.S. currency. At a sale price of $660 per square foot, it was the highest price ever paid for an office building in downtown Los Angeles. Not a shabby place to tell my little delayed spring break adventure to my future bosses, you think? That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Hope you found that as interesting as those partners and other staff did that Monday in Los Angeles years ago. This is The Undertaker Navigator, hoping you'll come back for more content.